I do believe that there's three major paradoxes of which we should try to make sense in order to understand what is going to happen to Europe in this year and the years to come, because 2017 can turn to be as important in the history of Europe as 1917 was. First is what I'm going to call the Central European paradox, and it's a very straight one. If you read public opinion polls, you're going to see that Central and East Europeans still are among the most pro-European societies in Europe. Why then they're voting for the Eurosceptical governments? It's not just Hungary, you can see Poland, but you can see all over. I mean, it's not just connected to one. And secondly, Central Europeans do not trust their politicians. This is also what the polls are showing very much. But if this is the case, why they're kind of so much easily allowing the system of check and balances to be dismantled? Why, if you mistrust politicians, you're ready to allow them to concentrate so much power in their heads? Most of East Europeans, even when they're very critical to the European Union, they know that the life of their society outside of the European Union is not going to be better. But what you see in Eastern Europe is not Euroscepticism, but Euro-pessimism. You don't believe that the project is going to survive. And this, to a great extent, is connected to the fact that, unlike West Europeans, East Europeans has the collapse of a political system in their personal biographies. In a traditional liberal thinking, we assume that separation of power is the way to keep the elites accountable. In the perception of many people on the street, the separation of powers is the way for the elites to avoid accountability. You have a government saying, listen, we cannot do it because of the courts. We cannot do it because of the European Union. We cannot do it because the media is after us. How you ask to have jobs when the central bank is not allowing it? From the perspective of these people, the only way to keep somebody accountable is to give him the whole power. And it's a tricky game, because you easily can give the people the whole power. The only problem is how you can get out of them. And I'm saying this because there is one very important vulnerability at the heart of liberal democracy. Liberal democracy promised the losers that they are not a total losers, that you can regroup, you can go to the election before, that your rights are going to be respected even when you're losing. But the opposite side of this is that the majority is never the real winner. And the second, which I'm going to call the West European paradox, is the following. If you go on the elections all over, you're going to see that the younger people, the better educated, as if they're much more supportive to the European Union. After the financial crisis, some of this younger generation is quite politicized. It is on the streets, it's interested in politics. Why it is so politically ineffective? Paradoxically, this young youth kind of populated political movements are not going to have the European Union exactly because of the anti-institutional ethos of the people that populate them. And the third paradox that I was trying to basically discuss is to what extent and why the meritocratic elites, very much being embodied by the high bureaucracy in Brussels, is so resented. Listen, look at them. This is the best educated. They went through exams. This is not the most corrupt part of Europe, just the opposite. Comparing with basically what's happening in most of the countries, they're much more clean. Why then people are so much resenting them and much more ready to give a credit to the local kind of corrupt bosses than to these well-educated people in Brussels? And my argument goes back to Michael Young and his analysis of meritocracy coming from now 40, 50 years ago, where he said, listen, the problem with the meritocracy is that it makes a very clear distinctions between winners and losers. And it produces winners who, exactly because they do it the right way, through exams, through effort, don't have the feeling that they own anything to anybody. The mobility of these elites, the idea that you can be a great professor in Budapest, but the next day you can be a professor in Paris, that you can be a banker in London and a banker in New York, makes people very mistrustful for these elites. So strangely, the clash between the meritocratic elites and the populist party is a clash between the exit party and the loyalty party. Populist parties do not promise to nationalize industries. They promise to nationalize the elites. And this nationalization of the elites, I do believe, is one of the major impacts of what we are seeing there. And this attacks the very cosmopolitan nature of the idea of the open society as we have been basically imagining it decades ago. In 2016, part of the major shock came to the fact not only that bad things happened, I mean Brexit, I mean American elections, but that nobody expected it. In 2017, we have an opposite dynamic. Now, majority of the people are sure that everything worst is going to happen. Mr. Wilders is going to be the new Prime Minister of Netherlands. Marie Le Pen is going to be the President of France, and I don't know, probably Alternative for Germany is going to enter the next German government. All this can happen, but most probably it will not happen. So from this point of view, the very fact that these negative expectations are not going to happen can give much more legitimacy to the European Union as a political project. And here comes Machiavelli, and I'm going to end on this. He used to say, it's never a good idea to surrender for one very simple reason. You don't know what the fortune has prepared for us.